today, we want to, first of all, update you, and we have Lieutenant Colonel Hirsch is going to update you just on the current situation where we are now, as we do every day. And then I want to move to Fiamma, who is, there really is no greater expert on global anti-Semitism, particularly in the West, beginning with Europe, than Dr. Fiamma Nirenstein. And the point that we want to, I think the themes that we want to emphasize, Fiamma, today is if there ever was a doubt about the convergence of what used to be called anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, the Hamas, the ISIS-like Hamas Iranian regime massacre has so many explicit themes of anti-Semitism, of Nazi and Soviet conspiracy theories inside this latest mass murder of Jewish children, that we have to raise this issue as we see demonstrations backing the massacre, backing Hamas, backing the Iranian regime, backing Hezbollah in cities in Europe and in the United States. And we have to talk about what that means, what it means for us as a people, what it means for the nation state of the Jewish people itself. Let me turn to Maurice now. Maurice, give us a little bit of an update from where you're sitting about where we are today before we move to a very pointed, important conversation with Fiamma.
Okay, Dan. So we're talking still about over 1,400 Israelis and some foreigners killed on Saturday and in the days that have passed since. We're talking about something in the region of 6,600 rockets that have already been fired into Israel, indiscriminately targeting Israel's civilian population. The rockets, despite the Israeli response, continue to rain down on us today. Last night, there was a massive salvo towards Tel Aviv and the heartland of Israel's civilian population again. And also, we've seen constant attempts to continue to breach even the fence from Gaza and more infiltrations into Israel, with more terrorists being killed and captured. What we've seen in Gaza at the moment is that the movement of the Gazan population down south, as the Israeli IDF asked them to do, despite the attempts of Hamas that had put up barricades, literally physical barricades, to stop the civilian population running away. As the UK minister cleverly defined it, Israel is trying to save civilians and Hamas is trying to intentionally endanger civilians. On the north, we also have a tense situation. Some of the area close to the border being declared a closed military zone. The fear being, exactly as we discussed beforehand, that terrorists from Hezbollah will adopt the practices of Hamas, which is really, as we know, an Islamic doctrine of warfare, storming the civilian populations and killing civilians. So Israel has taken precautions there. We have to understand that whilst the world is really stressing about the 1 million Palestinians who have left their homes, the Gazans who have left their homes, there is also some 600,000 Israelis living outside of their homes. Those who are living close to the border on the south, those who are living close to the borders on the north. People have been displaced from every single place possible. And we still have this ongoing subject of the Israelis and some foreigners who have been kidnapped and are still being held by Hamas and the other terrorist organizations. Some of them, as we mentioned yesterday, affiliated with Mahmoud Abbas's PLO. And so that's the update, really. Danger coming in from all sides, a particularly precarious situation to be in. And at the moment, waiting for the start of the ground operation in Gaza to finally rid us entirely of the Hamas terrorists from the Gaza Strip.
One thing I wanted to mention, Maurice, is something that you and I just chatted about before we went on live with our colleagues, friends, and family from across the ocean, and that is that Metula, up in the up in the north, right up in the north, was actually emptied last night because of concerns that the precedent Hamas created by this surprise strategic surprise that resulted in a deadly invasion and takeover of Israel's 25 of Israel's southern communities, kibbutzim, towns, and cities. That has created a very, very dangerous precedent where any sort of deterrence that had been turned towards or affected the Hezbollah and perhaps Syrian, Iranian operatives in Syria has now been, in a sense, taken off the table, and has really encouraged enemies in the north, perhaps, to try the same type of invasion. So this has been an increased concern among Israel Defense Forces that a copycat attack could happen in the north, not just rockets.
At the same time, Dan, just a last point to remember that as the Gazans were trying to breach the fence with Israel in 2018, March 2018, what they then called the Great March of Return, which was really just a cover for the attempts to breach Israel and murder Israelis. Then at the same time, Israel discovered in the north the attack tunnels that had been dug for many, many years by Hezbollah. And so already that's part of this whole picture of seeing that the Iranian proxies for 5 years really have been working on this operation to infiltrate Israel with as many forces and as possible, as many terrorists as possible, simply for the pure and sole reason of murdering Jews. That's what the Iranians say all the time. That's what Khomeini says all the time. Israel must be wiped out, and that's what his proxies are doing.
If I can add, to the updating of the situation, there are now the news that President Biden is coming to Israel on Wednesday. This is very important to underline because the United States at the moment are at their top of vicinity of a friendship toward Israel, which is something that, of course, we will discuss specifically, and we will give our interpretation, and we will understand better in the following hours what it means for Israel and how much the Americans are supposed to fight on our side in the coming hours. This is not on the field, but I mean in general with the weaponry and ideologically, which is more.
If I may just give one important, very literally important update from the last few minutes. Suella Braverman, the foreign minister, if I'm not mistaken, for England, just the Home Secretary for England, for the UK, just tweeted about the chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, saying that it is, and I quote, to hear it shouted in public causes alarm not just to Jews, but to all decent people. Those who promote hate on Britain's streets should realize that our tolerance has limits. That's an important statement from such
it's also a very good segue. It's an excellent segue into Fiamma, because from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. As I said on Fox Television on the Mark Levin, Life, Liberty, Levin the other night, that has been understood and misunderstood. It is a call for massacre. It is not a call. When you call for freeing Palestine from the river, and from the river to the sea, you mean the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, is a clarion call for the destruction of Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. Had it not been taken that seriously, it's become the clarion call on hundreds of universities across the United States and Canada and Europe, and it is an intolerable, genocidal, policidal call for the elimination of Jews. And it is our position here at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs to take a zero tolerance policy for this type of anti-Semitism, which is clearly collective and individual both. And with this, we're going to turn to Fiamma Nirenstein to give us her sense of covering these issues. As a matter of fact, I will say Fiamma is one of the first analysts years and years and years ago to connect what is called anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism as something that she coined, actually, Israelophobia, which many of us have copied in recent years. Fiamma, you first mentioned this 25 years ago during the second Intifada, if I'm not mistaken, or the Al-Aqsa War of Terror, as it was more properly coined. So give us your sense, Fiamma, of how you're seeing this convergence of classic anti-Semitism with the attack on Jews in southern Israel, and now as we move to the north as well.
Well, look, I'm very glad of what Braverman said, but I think it's very late. It's very late to affirm that this kind of slogan that is really, as you say now, the basic idea of it is just obliterating the state of Israel, obliterating the state of the Jews, and not because, of course, of political reasons, but because of ideological, very important anti-Semitic motivation that are born either in the classical anti-Semitism and in the Muslim anti-Semitism that has become very important in the Arab states and in Europe with the immigration, and now we will face it in all of its might, as we are doing in these days when after what has happened to us, they are raising their ugly heads everywhere in the capitals of Italy, in England too, and in Paris and in Belgium. Of course, this is happening everywhere. What I think is that we must be ready, as we are making ourselves ready to face here a stage of the war that we have never experimented before, because this is even worse than the war of 73. Now we must be ready to face a new wave of anti-Semitism that will be much worse and more aggressive than before. Why that? Why I say that it will be worse and more aggressive? Because it shows that it is ready to forget completely what has happened to us in the past days in the kibbutzim that have been assaulted, the people that have been slaughtered in the most terrible ways that anybody could imagine, that we were never even in our mind before. And even if this has happened, to use against Israel, against the Jewish people, slogans that you would never expect. Look, in France, for instance, you have this Mélenchon, that is one of the leader of the Yellow Vest movement, that say that well, that they killed them, they were dancing on your occupied land. You understand, you understand the complexity of this discourse. It means that, first of all, we are occupiers, colonizers, imperialist oppressors of the Palestinians, and that what they have done to us, even if it has been exposed from every corner as one of the most disgusting and terrible slaughters of our time, had a right to happen because of what we are.
So there's an important point here, Fiamma, that you're breaking up. Let me just, I want to emphasize a point that you're making here. Even in a situation of Nazi ISIS-like slaughter of children, the beheading and burning of children and women and entire families, mass execution, machete, decapitation, even in this situation, it took 8 days for the classic Israel is illegitimate. Israel is an illicit entity. Israel is a colonialist and imperialist implant in the Middle East. It took only 8 or 9 days for that to come back. And that is the framing of Israel's, the mendacious accusation of Israel's essentially being born in sin in the Middle East.
Yes, now I would like to underline a very important point. We must not think about these groups. There was another one in Italy that was shouting with Palestinian flags, kill them, kill them, kill them. That was Italians, and I'm very sorry to say that, but we will kill them, we will kill them. So the idea of murdering has become very popular, you understand, so what Hamas has done, contrary to whatever has been discussed, as many people said, well, Hamas has shot into its own feet doing what they are doing. It's not true. The idea of murdering now has become even more popular among the anti-Semite. Anti-Semitism has arrived in the past to conceive and perpetrate the Holocaust, and they aim to this same aim, the same of the past. I mean, they are Hitlerites as they were before, and so they are today. Now, I'm not saying that in Europe there is a Nazi movement of this kind. Actually, most of these movements are on the left. I'm sorry to say that the human rights movement now defending the Palestinian go back to all the stereotypes describing what we are doing today, just to stop Hamas from being what it has been, and then for being able to continue living where we live. It's absolutely evident that we cannot keep living with a neighbor like Hamas. But, you know, now the issue that is coming up and up and up again to counter our fight and our war against Hamas is the idea that the poor Palestinians are not all a part of Hamas. They are mostly innocent people that must be defended. So look, at the very beginning, we have had from the European Union unanimous condemnation, but from some states like Spain, Ireland, Belgium, and France, that you know they have a very strong presence of a Muslim in their country, and this says something. Now things are already changing. It was von der Leyen, that the president, that was our main defenders, but immediately after, Borrell, as usual, came up with the idea that the international right of the Palestinians must be defended, that we have to give them back water and electricity and whatsoever. So what is happening today is that the European Union is going to a division, an internal institutional division between states, because it goes back to all the stereotypes, no matter what they have been seen happening here. So again, what I have to say is that their analysis is completely wrong about occupation, the Palestinian people, the Palestinian leadership in the territories, the concept of territories that is coming up and up again, and so the problem is that Europe, using continuously these stereotypes of occupation, which is the main word that has been used by the European Union whenever they spell the word Israel, makes a terrible confusion again. For instance, about Gaza itself. Gaza is not occupied since a long time. They repeated that Gaza is a jail in the open air. They do not even take care of describing the situation as it has been, as it was, and it has developed in the past very near times, when we have been, even before this terrible war that they have brought to us, of certainly not we to them, of terrorist incursions that have been very frequent and continuous, either from Gaza and from the territories. The other point that Europe claims all the time, and that gives food to the anti-Semitism, is the idea that even if a war against Hamas is conceivable, they don't arrive to say that is right, but they say it's conceivable. On the other side, we must keep a good relation with Abu Mazen and
Mahmoud Abbas.
Mahmoud Abbas.
So here they went even further yesterday, Borrell, in his statement, discussing the aid of the European Union to the Palestinian Authority. He said like this, that we can't stop our aid because that would be collective punishment, as if he was using Israeli terms to describe Israel as to why they have to keep on funding, and the EU has to keep on funding millions and millions of shekels into the coffers of the Palestinian Authority to help the Palestinian Authority do what? continue to reward the murderers of Jews.
With Lina, I want to be very specific factually. We have produced at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs with Maurice and with Yossi Cooperwasser the determining evidence that the Palestinian Authority continues to fund as a line item in their budget to dead or captured terrorists, including all of the Hamas terrorists who were killed or captured in this recent massacre by Hamas. They will receive lifetime annuities, and they will receive posthumous promotions in the Palestinian security forces, as well as the nomenclature of shahidim, and their families will receive pensions, which are called the terror incentive pensions for the rest of their life. That is what the United States House of Representatives has prohibited it with the passing of the Taylor Force Act, and what Israel has prohibited according to what's called the freeze law.
So to summarize, what is our international position? It's like this: the raising of and changing of the attitude of the public in Europe after a first moment of horror and disgust. Okay, now they are immediately changing their attitude, considering the Palestinians again as a people of exploited and poor third world colonialized people that must be defended by the left-wing human rights movements. This is what's happening, and these are the people. Okay, so what you see today in every discussion, and I participate in a lot of them on the television, is that you always have somebody that raised about the human rights of the Palestinians, number one, and second, on the distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. So this is the general attitude that we have to deal with, and while anti-Semitism is raising and growing with a different head, you know, the monster is again building a mostly large and unexpected new sentiment that is also fed by the presence of many Muslims over in Europe that have been that are connected to the Spanish, Irish, British, Italian powers, and more they will try to make their voice be heard inside the left-wing parties and movements. So this is something that is politically going to be expanded. On the other side, we have a European Union that has always been vile and totally trying to ignore Iran's role in all of this story. So we cannot expect from the European Union to do as anybody else in the world, and as the Americans are doing, that must denounce the fact that beyond the attack of Hamas and the preparation of the Hezbollah to enter in a war against us, there stands the strategy of Iran as a power that aims at the control of the Middle East and of the world. Finally, no, we cannot expect this from Europe. We will have to try to explain and repeat and describe the role of Iran. This is something that we must really do if we want to fight this struggle. One. Number two, we have to explain again and again what you said then 1 minute ago about the attitude of the Palestinian Authority. Number three, we have to go back to the historical truth about occupation, human rights, territories, because this is the real thing that the European Union, even if approving the ICRA, we have written a book, we have a little book about it that is very important, because it says that the European Union, yes, they approved the ICRA, but they never put it in movement. They don't use it. So the fact that there is a lot of anti-Semitism that is in fact all aimed against Israel, against the Jewish state, is something that has never been taken really into consideration as something that has to be fought against.
Well, let me raise one point here, Fiamma, is that if you leave the Europeans and the Americans and others in the free world have been looking to Israel to set the pace, to set the standard for raising and arguing and countering against this anti-Semitism, which has gone on for decades. It's gone on expressly since the 1967 war, where Israel has, I would say, performed less than ideally, to put it diplomatically, is in taking the anti-Semitism against it seriously, because of the Israeli conception that as long as you have an army, and as long as you have a country, and as long as you perceive yourself as militarily strong, then the words, as David Ben-Gurion used to say, is shmum. The words are less important than the actions on the ground. David Ben-Gurion used to say, he said to Moshe Sharet, actually in the 1950s, when there were infiltrations from Gaza, the same infiltrations before Hamas was created in 1988, the charter in 1988, but there were still Palestinian terrorist infiltrations that Yasser Arafat was leading from Gaza in the late 1950s when the Fatah was just going, but what just got going. What Ben-Gurion said to Sharet in a famous exchange, it's less important than what the Goyim, what he called the Goyim, say than what the Jews do. That has proven to have been a mistaken assessment, because the anti-Semitic Jew hatred rhetoric over decades that is really climaxing in this notion of Jews as an occupier. When they call Israel an occupier of its own country, they are likening it to Nazi Germany. That has been the point of reference about occupation. And therefore, Israel has not done a good job in advancing a no tolerance policy for the very type of anti-Semitism that resulted in the Holocaust. And here you see decades of this murderous incitement in the Palestinian Authority, in Hamas, in radical Islam, in the progressive so-called and radical communities in Europe, and increasingly over the past years in the United States. And that has now a climax, if you will, into this unprecedented mass murder, massacre of Jewish and Israeli and non-Jewish civilians.
That, Dan, has been part of the EU's policy now for decades. Since the start of the Oslo Accords, they have watched and seen the vile anti-Semitism of the Palestinian Authority in every walk of life, and they have ignored it.
Well, Israel's ignored it.
They've tried to downplay it. That's very true. Sadly enough, also Israel's governments have consistently ignored that anti-Semitism, right, haven't called it out, haven't demanded that it stopped, and the European Union as well has seen it happening and has also just downplayed it entirely.
Yeah, but the point is that anti-Semitism has become such an important part of the religion of our times, which is the religion of all the organizations that pretend to be human rights defenders. You know, it's so much part of it that all the one that considers themselves the good people, the one that defends the children, the women, the LGBTQ, they all at the end of the blacks, they all at the end of the day find their anti-Semitic point and come against us. So that's the reason why for us it's a very, very difficult thing to forbid this kind of anti-Semitism, because we can ask the organizations like the United Nations, that are the most anti-Semitic of all, the European Union, not to be anti-Semite, to denounce any single sentence that we think it's anti-Semite, and to make them pay for that.
I want to make
on another. But let me finish the sentence. But it's not. But to these organizations and to these good people that at the end of the day are the real anti-Semite while pretending to be human rights defenders, we can only show that we are strong, that we will not abide from our position of as Israel, of the defenders of the Jewish people. This is the first and the foremost important thing that we have to do in these days, to be again the strong defenders of the Jewish people. You are anti-Semite, you will find in front of you not only an ideological point, but you will find in front of you a democratic, liberal state where religious and non-religious live together with Arabs, with different minorities, where women, homosexuals, and anybody who is part of it are defended. And still, we will be the one that will bring a terrible war against the people that try to attack Israel as if it didn't have a right to exist. We will not allow that because we are not at the time of the Holocaust. They tried an Holocaust on us. So that's the most important anti-Semitism, the one that then takes weapons against us. And there are many, as they say in their demonstration, we will kill you, we will kill you. No, you will not kill us because we will win. That's the reason why they will not kill us. And not only because we will be able to fight you in the field of the written papers, but also on the field. This is what we are doing today. People must understand that.
We invite you to send questions and even send comments to us here over your chat mechanism, the chat feature in this discussion. We always welcome your engagement. We welcome your comments. We welcome your questions. We're happy to answer them. It's important, Fiamma, just to sharpen this point that you've made very well, which is when people in the name of human rights are erasing, are engaged in the erasure of the very existence of Israel, we understand that the argument for human rights is for the human rights of the Hamas, of the PLO, of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad to kill Israelis. That's what they're arguing for human rights. Because if you look at any of the so-called human rights protesters, demonstrations in Europe and in the United States, not one is calling for two states for two peoples. Not one is calling for an equitable territorial resolution of a 100-year conflict, or certainly since 1967, for those that want to take a minimalist view. Each one of them are calling for the erasure of the Jewish nation state that they claim was, quote, a Nazi occupier or a South African apartheid entity. This is the important point about the distortion, about the complete deception of the human rights argument against Israel. In the name of human rights, the Soviets used to talk about that. Stalin used to talk about virtue, he used to talk about justice, he talked about equality. And in the name of that, in the name of those principles, they're talking about the elimination of Jews as cosmopolite in Soviet Russia, or in Nazis as subhuman. So people talk about justice, and in the name of justice, they're murdering. Jews have been murdered in history, and that's exactly what's going on now. So don't be fooled by the protestations and demonstrations on behalf of human rights, because it means in practice the complete opposite of that it means according to the Webster Dictionary. So here we have some questions and answers. Lise Corson, the reemergence of support for Hamas being fed by the Biden administration. She makes the point that Biden embraces Abbas even after pay for slay, and evidence that the PA-affiliated groups like a designated Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which is actually the Iranian-backed jihadi sector of the Fatah, and Fatah, they both pledged allegiance to and declared war on the U.S. You want to take that, Maurice? You want to?
I have to say that it's going to be difficult to see President Biden visit in Israel, especially if he does meet with Mahmoud Abbas. The U.S. Embassy in Cairo put out yesterday a transcript or a summary, at least, of President Biden's discussion with Abbas. I'll just read you some of the interesting parts. President Biden condemned Hamas's brutal attack on Israel and reiterated that Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. President Biden said that, Mahmoud Abbas did not say that. And if President Biden now, knowing that Abbas is incapable of condemning Hamas and in condemning the murder of the Jews, if he still agrees and goes to meet with him, that unfortunately will be a tremendous downside of his visit. And so it is difficult to understand really how President Biden and his administration continues to support Israel, but at the same time continues to support the same people who are day by day inciting the murder of Jews, as Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority.
One of the contextual points to make here, dear friends and colleagues of ours, is that what has happened over the last 9 days has not only been a massacre of Jews and others and Thais and Muslims and Christians who work together with us in the South, it's been a massacre of conceptions. And one of the conceptions that Maurice has worked on when he was, the director of legal affairs at Palestinian Media Watch, which has done a fantastic job in monitoring the Palestinian media, and now is a senior scholar here at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, running the PA Accountability Project and Reform Project, is to point out that there has been an inversion of legitimacy. Beginning in 1993, Israel, much to our regret, participated in the greatest inversion of its own legitimacy and its handoff to what we know as the Palestine Liberation Organization, dedicated doctrinally and practically and ideologically to the dismemberment of the Jewish and democratic state.
Can I say something here? I'm sorry to say that this process that you're describing so well has not ended, unfortunately, even if there was such an evident mistake. The newspapers are in Europe now are full in the front page of articles by David Grossman or other that come from, or plenty of our writers and that try to put the accent mostly on the right of the poor Palestinians that now must be looked at from the humanitarian point of view. So see how this humanitarian point of view, as much as the issue of two states for two people, is now becoming the Trojan horse for this kind of...
You have to understand, Fiamma, these people are in a very difficult situation. These people have been Israel's so-called peace camp for 30 years. They've now seen Israelis. Many of the peace camp members, the backbone of the peace camp was really the kibbutzim, the towns and cities on the Gaza front, where the residents would take in members from people from Gaza. They would look after their children. They would feed them. They would provide them with work. Sure. They were the backbone of the peace camp. And now these people who are so intellectually lacking are just incapable of realizing that the Arabs, the Palestinians made fools of them for 30 years. And what they're doing now really is exposing their true character. But no, we can still make peace with the homicidal maniacs from ISIS, Hamas.
So that conception, that consensus has been broken. There's been one second.
I wanted to complete this. Then you'll go to the conclusions, because I suppose that there we are. No, I want to say, I'm not joking about the importance in the Western world of the concept of peace. Okay. Peace is a very important thing, but it's a very important concept in our civilization. I mean, the truth is that Israel has always tried to pursue peace, and that the Palestinians have always refused peace. So peace has been for us very important. We made several mistakes about that, but the concept is right, because any democracy always wants peace, and there is no mistake in that. It's only that you have to realize how to get it. Now, it's very clear, and it's evident that we must go back and back and back to this concept. Peace can be realized, but only when Hamas, the Hezbollah, and their sponsor in this triangle, which is not a triangle because it has many different, Iran have been defeated. Until they will be around, until they will be organizing the murderous strategy that is their own since years and years, peace is not possible. So do you want peace? We have to ask to our interlocutor, just defeat Iran, Hamas, the Hezbollah, and their friends. That
Including the
point, please
Palestinian
come
Authority.
back to include the authority, the Palestinian Authority. When this is done, please then come back to me and let's talk about peace. I want peace so much, and this is written in all of my history. Do you agree, Dan?
Yeah, I do agree. I just wanted to finish the point before, as we're going to go to questions now. Can we be seen through these questions?
Yeah, we can still be seen, but the audience can't see that. I don't think the audience can see the other questions.
Okay, just a few more minutes. And the conception that's been massacred here, dear friends, is the idea that Israel is an obstacle to peace so long as it insists on territorial integrity, defensible borders, and its right to live in secure and recognized boundaries in its own homeland. This fundamental truth has been a subject of complete distortion, that is whereby Israel can't possibly be a peace partner so long as it remains unprepared to concede major territories of its own homeland. And now, as Fiamma has pointed out, you take the concept is that in the same way that we have, you have Black Lives Matter in the United States, and she's written a book called Jewish Lives Matter, which argue for diplomacy based on Jewish rights, not based on concessions, but based on rights. That's where you have a parity between Palestinian claims and Israeli claims. It's a very important conception that was destroyed in this last massacre, but it is attempted to be undone by an international community that fundamentally misunderstands the conflict and misunderstands what Israel's rights-based diplomacy is all about. Let me just say, before we go to the questions, that the JCPA, Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, is positioned as a center for moral and strategic clarity. We will uncover, we will expose, we will reveal these distortions of logic and of moral clarity, and through our research and through the books that we've done, just like we just now did. You can go onto our site and download for free, where Fiamma has written, I have written, Maurice has written articles for Oslo at 30, the lessons learned after Oslo at 30. There's an Oslo conception that's based on the...
sorry to interrupt, just so the people understand, at this moment as we are talking, Tel Aviv, Bnei Brak, Givatayim, all of that area, millions of Israelis are being sent to their bomb shelters as Hamas continues to rain missiles down on them, rockets down on them, Bet Shemesh as well, really millions of Israel's population. Sorry, Dan, I apologize.
So let's go to questions. Enough hearing us on the soapbox here. I know we had something from Elise has been very active. Harold Road points out there in Islam, there's no concept of peace as we understand it. What?
There's a siren.
There's a siren here in Jerusalem.
There's a Jerusalem siren?
Let's cut off, unfortunately. We need to run to our bomb shelters. Sorry, everybody.
I didn't hear. We have a siren
There's
here?
a siren outside.
Okay, there's a siren. We have to get up. If you want to stay with us, we have to go down for a couple of minutes into the bomb shelter. Hopefully we'll be back shortly. Okay, just had to make sure the wife and family are okay. Thank you for staying with us. You can't make this stuff up, This is that we actually, as we went down to the shelter, we heard pretty loud booms, which means that it fell fairly close to where we are. I don't want to say where we are exactly, so that not to direct the enemy. I want to mention that we would very much welcome your support. You can email us directly, Diker at DIKER@jcpa.org. $180, $360, $1,800, $3,600, all tax-free through the Central Fund for Israel. Supports our ability to operate. Here's Fiamma. Operate the war room, and as some of you have mentioned in your questions, which we'll get back to, there are 11 more. There are 7 questions on the 7 questions left on the Q&A. But we have established the first ever Arabic, Farsi, and English communication center as part of our war room. That will continue indefinitely. And we will actually be the nerve center in Arabic to the rest of the Arab world, actually to the Palestinian public and to the Arab-Israeli community in Arabic, actually positioning ourselves as the nerve center, as the anchor of stability, of clarity, and engagement with our Arab neighbors near and far, as we try to reestablish after the massacre of the reigning conceptions, Israel's indigeneity in the Middle East, and our alliances with our Arab neighbors in the Middle East, of which we are the most ancient indigenous member. And this allows us an opportunity to reposition ourselves, and we need your support. We live only from private support. We are not government funded, and 98% of all funds go directly into the content programs. So we really, it doesn't matter between $1 and $1 million. We'll take your we welcome your support from across the seas, and the contributor information, if you're able to help us, is on the JCPA website, or please email us directly. You're very welcome to email me directly, Diker, D-I-K-E-R, at jcpa.org, or Maurice, M-A-U-R-I-C-E, at jcpa.org. So here we go. Let us go back to some of the questions, because we still have a lot of our friends. Yeah, just a couple more questions. For what one, Alan Livingston writes, would you comment on the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism? It's a working definition. Actually,
say a couple of words about
how is it spreading, and how can we help now in the future? That's a question that Alan Livingston asked us now.
Fiamma
wrote a book about it.
IHRA. You say IRA, I say IHRA.
No, they won't understand IHRA. The Americans won't understand IHRA. IHRA.
IHRA has been really spread a lot. I mean, it has been an immense success from the point of view of the possibility of all the institutions to say, okay, yes, I'm fighting anti-Semitism, I'm adopting IHRA, okay, but there is a big gap between affirming that you are fighting anti-Semitism and then doing that. What's the point? The point is that IHRA, for the first time, putting together a lot of different points about what is anti-Semitism, writes down also that for the first time, after so many books, among them mine too, have been written about the fact that nowadays the new anti-Semitism is all based on the hate against Israel. Okay, so they put it down there, and they say that there are things about Israel that when they are prejudicial, and when they aim at the destruction of the state of Israel, this can be considered anti-Semitism. This has been adopted all over the world by everybody, but this has not avoided then all the things that then push anti-Semitism on. For instance, as I said before, while the European Union adopted IHRA, as many different states, I'm sure, for instance, let's say that Spain, I don't know about that, but I suppose that also Spain, because everybody did, adopted IHRA. Then at the end of the day, what do? They repeat that the Israeli are illegal occupier of the Palestinian land. So when you say something like that, then all the contents of these affirmations aim to describe a Jew, an Israeli, the most important expression of Jews today, the collective Jew that is Israel, as an occupier that is a colonialist and an imperialist, and also an apartheid and apartheid defenders, so to say, somebody that is not scandalized to see that in his country apartheid is practiced. So I mean, this was just an example to say that it's not that whoever adopts IHRA then is really fighting against this kind of new anti-Semitism that is all aimed against Israel. Not only this, there are other organizations, among them one which is called the Jerusalem Group, and then another one in the United States, of whom, I don't know, Peace Now, for instance, another kind of institution are part, that put together other definition of anti-Semitism, just to counter this definition, so that when Biden had to say what was America adopting, said we will fight anti-Semitism and we will adopt all of this definition of anti-Semitism, and this way watering the IRA definition that has as a good point the one that I described before. This is the state of the things.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a one question. We only have a couple of minutes left before we let you go. We promise we try to keep this to 35, 40 minutes so that you can continue your day or begin your day. One of the important questions is, why has Israel lost the PR war? The Palestinians have run circles around Israel in the PR war. There are very good reasons for that. Let me just say that the Jerusalem.
Mark Twain is the answer.
Mark Twain is the answer.
A lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth even gets its boots on.
It's a good way of putting it. Mark Twain.
Send it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. But the bottom line is that Israel never put enough emphasis on the written and spoken word as being as important as the ability to defend yourself physically with guns, planes, with ships, with tanks. And as we're seeing now, and the JCPA has taken the lead, the head of the spear on the war against disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, and we are taking upon ourselves with moral clarity, strategic clarity, to put our enemies on the defensive, because the conceptions that have driven the relationship between Israel and the Palestinians have been based on mendacity, on slanders, on libels, and it is time to take a no-tolerance policy to these types of lies and distortions, so that we're taking the lead in that, and we want to supply you with the tools and the weaponry in order to be able to dispel the rumors, the lies, the myths through our legal department, through our diplomacy ability, through our understanding of history and the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, to give you the tools in order to really take apart, to deconstruct these horrendous lies that have basically characterized Israel's position in the Middle East for so long. We have the opportunity now with the Abraham Accords, which clearly there's a tension there with some of our Arab partners because of the very difficult situation they've been put in, and it requires moral clarity on their part as well. But in the meantime, we're all of us together on this call fighting for the very right of the nation state of the Jewish people to live in peace and security and legitimacy and prosperity. And we're doing it together with our Arab partners in the Middle East. Jerusalem Center has been under the radar and above the radar, in contact and deep engagement with many countries in the Arab world, and we'll continue to do that. That's why we're establishing the Arabic Media Center and the Parsi Media Center. We're the home for the Iranian opposition in the diaspora and even in Iran. And so we see ourselves as an anchor of truth, an anchor of stability, an anchor of moral clarity. So please continue to join us tomorrow at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, 6 o'clock in California, and in London we'll be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll be here at 4 o'clock, and we'll have Khaled Abu Tuame, senior analyst here, and he will really bring you right up to the minute developments in the Palestinian Authority, in Hamas, and give you some real context as to how Hamas today is really the new ISIS, and the Palestinian Authority is no less guilty for its support of Hamas in terror financing. So in the meantime, thank you all so very much for joining us. We'll continue. I see there's so many questions. We'll continue to answer these questions tomorrow. We are just really a little bit out of time, and getting ready. As you'll see, if you come to our site, you see the types of analysis that we're doing and the tools that we're providing to you.
Yes,
What's that?
Harold.
Yeah, Harold. No, we mentioned Harold before. So
what is he writing?
No, he was writing about Islam. Harold's writing about Islam. All right, guys, we have to get going now. It's been almost an hour. Thank you so much for joining.